What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another day of ELA 1 with Mr. Williamson, your favorite class of the day. Okay, so our agenda for this class, which you should be accomplishing on either Wednesday the 27th or Thursday the 28th, depending on your map testing schedule. All right, so your warm up, reading pages 28 to 32, done with that. A short little reading quiz, done with that. Our agenda objective is happening now. Then we are going to read pages 32 to 43, and I'm going to ask you questions throughout. Try to be less questions. It's quite a bit of reading, so it's going to be a lot of just me reading. You guys can just follow along with me. You can read on your own, but then make sure that you are answering the questions in the video and doing them thoroughly, because that's what I'm looking at when I'm looking at these lessons. So then you'll have an exit ticket at the end after the videos. So our objective, I can analyze. Remember, analyze is look closely at something. Take a deeper look at it. Christopher's literal mindset and his initial attempts at detective work. Okay, so what is literal? It's factual, right? So we're going to look at his literal mindset and his attempts to start being a detective to find out who killed Wellington. Okay, everyone. So what I need you to do now is to get out your novels and open to page 32. I will project the words up on the screen, so don't stress if you don't have your book. But come get your book if you don't have it. I'm going to ask you questions as we're going, so you're going to need to have that book, and you become a better reader when you read with me. So our kind of focus to be thinking about what is literal? So literal, as I explained in the objective, is understanding words on a concrete, observable level. Concerned mainly with facts. So, what is like actually happening? Facts. And then abstract. What is abstract? Relate it to things you cannot see or touch rather than specific people or objects. So, if you think of like poetry, poetry is abstract. It might be talking about springtime, but it's actually meaning like new life and growth. So, it's kind of abstract. It's not the literal tree, but maybe talking about like growth and development, things like that. Okay, everyone, we are going to start chapter 61, which is near the top of page 32. Mrs. Forbes' school said that when Mother died, she had gone to heaven. That was because Mrs. Forbes is very old and she believes in heaven. And she wears tracksuit trousers because she says that they are more comfortable than normal trousers. And one of her legs is very slightly shorter than the other, one because of an accident on a motorbike. But when Mother died, she didn't go to heaven because heaven doesn't exist. Again, keep thinking about the literal versus the abstract and how Christopher's mind works. So, Mrs. Peters' husband is a vicar called the Reverend Peters, and he comes to our school sometimes to talk to us. And I asked him where heaven was, and he said, "It's not in our universe. It's another kind of place altogether." The Reverend Peters makes a funny ticking noise with his tongue sometimes when he is thinking, and he smokes cigarettes, and you can smell them on his breath, and I don't like this. I said that there wasn't anything outside the universe, and there wasn't another kind of place altogether, except that there might be if you went through a black hole. But a black hole is what is called a singularity, which means it is impossible to find out what is on the other side because the gravity of a black hole is so big that even electromagnetic waves like light can't get out of it. And electromagnetic waves are how we get information about things which are far away. And if heaven was on the other side of a black hole, dead people would have to be fired into space on rockets to get there. And they aren't, or people would notice. I think people would believe in heaven because they don't like the idea of dying, because they want to carry on living and they don't like the idea that other people will move into their house and put their things into their rubbish. The Reverend Peter said, "Well, when I say that heaven is outside the universe, it's really just a manner of speaking. I suppose what it really means is saying that they are with God." And I replied, "But where is God?" And the Reverend Peter said that we should talk about this on another day when he had more time. What actually happens when you die is your brain stops working and your body rots, like Rabbit did when he died and we buried him in the earth at the bottom of the garden. And all his molecules were broken down into molecules, and they went into the earth and were eaten by worms and went into the plants. And if we go and dig in the same place in 10 years, there will be nothing except his skeleton left. And in 1,000 years, even his skeleton will be gone. But that is all right, because he is a part of the flowers and the apple tree and the hawthorn bush now. When people die, they are sometimes put into coffins, which means that they don't mix with the earth for a very long time until the wood of the coffin rots. but mother was cremated. This means that she was put into a coffin and burned and ground up and turned into ash and smoke. I don't know what happens to the ash, and I couldn't ask at the crematorium because I didn't go to the funeral. But the smoke goes out of the chimney and into the air, and sometimes I look up into the sky and I think that there are molecules of mother up there, or in clouds over Africa or the Antarctic, or coming down as rain in the rainforest in Brazil, or in snow somewhere. Okay, everyone. So, got a question coming to you about that conversation that Christopher had with the Reverend Peters. So, what I want you to do is write a sentence describing this conversation between Christopher and Reverend Peters. How is Christopher more literal, more based off of facts and concrete things, than Reverend Peters? So, they have different views about the universe and heaven. So, how is Christopher more literal than Reverend Peters? I would like you to use the words literal and abstract in your response. You can also use things like literally or abstractly as well. Okay, everyone. So while Reverend Peters explains the abstract idea of heaven as a place to be with God, Christopher discusses the literal construction of the universe and also how a body literally decomposes. Where we see Reverend Peters talking about the abstract idea of God and heaven and outside the universe things as such, Christopher cannot see the abstract very well. So he speaks very literally about how the universe is constructed and why he thinks that makes heaven not a real place. Okay, so follow up. Let's go back into the text. So, rereading this paragraph from what we just read. But mother was cremated. This means that she was put into a coffin and burned and ground up and turned into ash and smoke. I do not know what happened to the ash, and I couldn't ask at the crematorium because I didn't go to the funeral. But the smoke goes out of the chimney and into the air, and sometimes I look up in the sky and I think that there are molecules of mother up there, or in clouds over Africa or the Antarctic, or coming down as rain in the rainforest of Brazil, or in snow somewhere. So the question is, in a way, this paragraph, Christopher is literal and abstractly. Okay, so I can even make a little separation here. I would say the first half he is being very literal, and the second half he is being abstract. So the question I want you to answer in 2 to 3 sentences: how is Christopher thinking here literal? How is he literally thinking? And how could you also read this as abstract? Explain using a quote in your answer. Okay, so Christopher literally describes the concrete details of the body after cremation. So he describes in this section what literally happens to the body. He lists places and different types of substances. So, on the other hand, this is an example of Christopher trying to define his own belief of the afterlife, thinking abstractly about the presence of his mother, who is literally no longer a part of his life. So this is where he starts to think abstractly. His mother is no longer there, but he thinks about where she might be now. She could be in the clouds over Africa or in Antarctica, or coming down as rain in Brazil, or in snow somewhere. So we see, although he is most of the time very literal, also the ability to be abstract. Okay, everyone, so we're going to continue on in chapter 67. The next day was Saturday, and there's not much to do on a Saturday unless Father takes me out somewhere on an outing to the boating lake or to the garden center. But on this Saturday, England were playing Romania in football, which meant that we weren't going to go on an outing because Father wanted to watch the match on the television. So I decided to do some more detection on my own. I decided that I would go and ask some of the other people who lived on our street if they had seen anyone killing Wellington, or whether they had seen anything strange happening in the street on Thursday night. Talking to strangers is not something I usually do. I do not like talking to strangers. This is not because of stranger danger, which they tell us about at school, which is where a strange man offers you sweets or a ride in his car because he wants to do sex with you. I'm not worried about that. If a strange man touched me, I would hit him. And I can hit people very hard. For example, when I punched Sarah because she had pulled my hair, I knocked her unconscious and she had concussion, and they had to take her to the accident and emergency department at the hospital. And also, I always have my Swiss Army knife in my pocket, and it has a saw blade which could cut a man's finger off. I do not like strangers because I do not like people I have never met before. They are hard to understand. It is like being in France, which is where we went on holiday sometimes when Mother was alive, to camp. And I hated it because if we went into a shop or a restaurant or on a beach, you couldn't understand what anyone was saying, which was frightening. It takes me a long time to get used to people I don't know. For example, when there is a new member of staff at school, I do not talk to them for weeks and weeks. I just watch them until I know that they are safe. Then I ask them questions about themselves, like whether they have pets and what is their favorite color and what do they know about the Apollo space missions. And I get them to draw a plan of their house and I ask them what kind of car they drive, so I get to know them. Then I don't mind if I am in the same room as them and don't have to watch them all the time. So, talking to other people in our street was brave. But if you were going to do detective work, you have to be brave. So I had no choice. First of all, I made a plan of our part of the street, which is called Randolph Street, and it looked like this. So we see where Christopher and his father live, and we see where Mrs. Shears lives, and where Wellington was killed. Then I made sure that I had my Swiss Army knife in my pocket, and I went out and I knocked on the door number 40, which happens to be one right across the street, which is opposite Mrs. Shears' house, which means that they were most likely to have seen something. The people who live at number 40 are called Thompson. Mr. Thompson answered the door. He was wearing a t-shirt which said, "Beer, helping ugly people have sex for 2,000 years." Mr. Thompson said, "Can I help you?" I said, "Do you know who killed Wellington?" I did not look at his face. I do not like looking at people's faces, especially if they are strangers. He did not say anything for a few seconds. Then he said, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm Christopher Boone from number 36, and I know you. You are Mr. Thompson." He said, "I'm Mr. Thompson's brother." I said, "Do you know who killed Wellington?" "Who the flip-flop is Wellington?" I said, "Mrs. Shears' dog. Mrs. Shears is from number 41. Someone killed her dog? With a fork. Jesus Christ. A garden fork. In case he thought I meant a fork that you eat with food. Then I said, "Do you know who killed him?" He said, "I haven't a bloody clue." He said, "Did you see anything?" I said, "Did you see anything suspicious on Thursday evening?" "Look, son, do you really think you should be going around asking questions like this?" And I said, "Yes, because I want to find out who killed Wellington, and I'm writing a book about it." And he said, "Well, I was in Colchester on Thursday, so you're asking the wrong bloke." I said, "Thank you," and I walked away. There was no answer at house number 42. I had seen the people who lived at number 44, but I did not know what their names were. They were black people, and they were a man and a lady with 2 children, a boy and a girl. The lady answered the door. She was wearing boots which looked like army boots, and there were 5 bracelets made out of silver-colored metal on her wrist, and they made a jingling noise. She said, "It's Christopher, isn't it?" I said that it was, and I asked her if she knew who killed Wellington. She knew who Wellington was, so I didn't have to explain, and she had heard about him being killed. I asked if she had seen anything suspicious on Thursday evening, which might be a clue. She said, "Like what?" And I said, "Like strangers, or like the sound of people arguing." But she said she hadn't. And then I decided to do what is called trying a different tack. And I asked her whether she knew of anyone who might want to make Mrs. Shears sad. And she said, "Perhaps you should be talking to your father about this." And I explained that I couldn't ask my father because the investigation was a secret, because he told me to stay out of other people's business. She said, "Well, maybe he has a point, Christopher." And I said, "So you don't know anything, which might be a clue?" She said, "No." And then she said, "You be careful, young man." Okay, so got a question coming to you about what we just read. As a reader, what evidence can you gather about the woman at house number 44? How has she been different to the other people that we talked about? Um, and then secondly, did you hear any clues here that Christopher might have missed while at house 44? The lady at house 44 says something that he doesn't seem to have grasped. Okay, so the woman in house number 44 seems to know the neighborhood well. She knew who Christopher was. She knew who Wellington was. She knows Mrs. Shears. She seems interested in Christopher, but does not want to encourage him to do something dangerous. the kind of clue that she might have dropped that Christopher didn't seem to get. When asked who might have wanted to make Mrs. Shear sad, she responded, "Perhaps you should ask your father about this." An interesting note and something to pay attention to in the future, but I will leave it at that.